Hello, welcome to today's webcast. My name is Demet Tunc. I lead the Customer Experience Council at the Conference Board. Today's webcast is all about leadership, personal impact, and the soft skills that you need to have a powerful presence, executive presence. My guest speaker, Esther Stanhope, she's the author of her recently published book, which is about speaking confidently in public. Goodbye Glossophobia is here with me. Banish your fear of public speaking. Welcome, Esther.
Hello, thank you for having me, Demet.
Thank you for joining us. Before we start the conversation, let me give you a couple of tips about this webcast. You can ask questions via the chat box that appears at the bottom left of your screen. Please do so. Esther might also ask you some questions, and if you have any questions, please write them and I will pose them at the right moment to Esther. You can download the presentation if you wish to do so. At the end of this webcast, we will have a brief evaluation form. We will be very happy if you fill that out so that we improve ourselves for the future webcasts. Also, please feel free to share this program with your colleagues, with your friends within your network who might have an interest in speaking confidently in public. I also want to remind you that you can earn CP credits. To be able to do so, you need to stay online for the whole webcast, and you need to type your name 3 times. That will appear during the webcast in the boxes that are provided to you. Okay, that was all about the housekeeping rules. Let me first introduce you to Esther. She is an international speaker. She's a personal impact expert and a former BBC producer and a broadcaster. She has helped international celebrities, even politicians, so that they quickly engage with their audience and they radiate charisma live on air. She's interviewed people like Madonna and George Clooney, and what a pleasure for me to have Esther here. I will be the one that's going to interview her today. Currently, Esther helps clients to boost confidence levels, and also she helps people to speak with impact and influence. Her clients include Fortune 500 organizations. She also is invited to universities such as Harvard, Oxford, and Cambridge as a guest speaker, because speaking in public is important not only for the executives, for students, for anybody that needs to speak with influence. She is also known as the Impact Guru. I love that title. And that's a very short, brief introduction about Esther, and it's a pleasure to have you here, Esther, with us.
That was very well done. Thank you very much, Demet. And I'm sure you don't need much help with your public speaking because you're very good at it.
It's always good to improve. Okay, Esther, I've attended your master class. It was a couple of months ago in Copenhagen, where you were speaking about speaking like a leader.
Yeah.
And I still remember several tips from that master class. The things that I remember is the power pose, blow out the candle, smell the roses, if I remember well.
That's a good breathing exercise. You mustn't blow out without breathing in.
Okay, smell the roses, and many other tips which the audience will hear about it probably in the next 60 minutes. But before we start that, what a cover to choose for a book. So how come you chose this cover?
Well, it's very funny because the famous pop art picture, the Liechtenstein picture of the cartoon of the woman going, it's got that kind of panic look. And the idea was, and my designer who helped me with the book, Patrick, I said, what about, could we have my face on the Liechtenstein picture for a joke? Where I said, oh, that'd be quite funny. And that's how we got the picture. There's a picture of me actually posing like I had to do many pictures going like this so they could copy my face. But the point of the picture is it's that famous picture, fear, because that's how people feel when they have to speak in public. And the reason I wrote the book in the first place is because many of my clients, many executives, myself included in the past, are really terrified of public speaking. And that fear, that out-of-body experience, the sweats, the shakes, feeling that you forget how to speak English even when you are English, you and you are, all of those side effects, they really do hold people back in their careers. And as you climb up the leadership ladder, and when you become a leader, it's really surprising how often you are asked to speak, whether it's a conference call, a pitch, say a few words, at the retirement do, at the welcome event. There are so many opportunities to speak. And if you don't learn some of these quite simple tips of how to stand in the spotlight and feel comfortable, you are actually, you really aren't going to be, it's not good for your career.
Yeah, you won't be performing at your best.
Absolutely.
Even though you know the topic well, if you don't speak well, people may have a question mark about your knowledge.
Yeah, and the good news is that actually I have interviewed many people in my career, and I've helped and I've done workshops for and run masterclasses for thousands of leaders. And here's the good news: it's not that difficult to learn the tricks of how to speak well. And people think, ooh, fear, but actually anybody, any personality type, introvert, extrovert, doesn't matter what culture you are. And I know we've got a lot of people tuning in today from Singapore, Hong Kong, Sydney, the US, all over Europe. Thank you for tuning in. But it doesn't matter if English isn't your first language and you have to speak in English. It doesn't matter what language you're speaking in. You can be good. And I'm going to share some of my very simple and easy to adopt tips today.
I'm looking forward to hearing them. Here there are many leaders. I know you've met Madonna, but have you met any of the other leaders here? And if you have, what can you tell us about them?
So I haven't met all of these leaders, although I have. I have met one of Barack Obama's scriptwriters, so I know a lot of his tricks. I'm going to share a couple of his tricks later. I have been to the O2 Center, which is a massive. It's the big concert place in London where Michelle Obama spoke this year. I saw a few months back Michelle Obama. That was really interesting, and I went really so I could pick up some tips from Michelle Obama. So I've got a few tips from her. So I've got some Obama tips. I have interviewed George Clooney. I have interviewed Cuba Gooding Jr. there on the left at the Cannes Film Festival, and Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister. Many times when I was a producer at the BBC, when he was Mayor of London, he was a regular. We used to do a monthly question time, and I had to produce him live on air. So I know a little bit about how he operates behind the scenes.
Okay.
So I've picked up quite a few tips, and I've observed what people do and how they do it. And actually, there is a formula to being a successful speaker, but you've got to step out of your comfort zone. So are you ready?
I am ready, and I'm sure the audience is also ready.
Okay, so I'm going to be sharing some of my very simple tips with you. I've managed to boil it down to a relatively simple formula. So my first question is, if you think about how you speak, and this is a question for the audience here, think about how you speak and how well you speak like a leader. And I'd like you to give yourself a mark out of 10. And we'd really like to hear from you in this next hour. If you're listening live, send us your mark out of 10. What would you give yourself out of 10 and why? So if you think you're a 10 out of 10, please write in the chat box. Is it the chat box?
Yeah, it's called the chat box. So please type in your responses in the chat box that is provided to you. And so what would you rate yourself and why?
Yes, so if you're a 10 out of 10, we want to know why you are a 10. If you're a 3 or a 2 out of 10, we want to know why, and you can remain anonymous. But we'd quite like to know what country you're from, so we can say, we can kind of like get a sense of, there might be a cultural clue somewhere.
Okay, we'll wait for the responses while you speak.
Yes, excellent. So they can be coming in throughout the program, and also feel free to ask any specific questions. We will be answering questions at the end, but we can answer questions as we go along as well.
Just before you start, somebody is asking to share the name of the book. It is called Goodbye Glossophobia, which you will also get at the end of the webcast, and you can also see it at the website of the conference board. Okay, people are sending several responses, 7, 5, 6.
Great.
I speak fast and I fumble. I give myself 5 because I speak only when I know the topic.
Okay. Good. That's a good response. Okay, so speak too fast, that's a really common one.
I don't breathe.
Yeah. That's the tip there is
breathe.
I'll quickly do the blow out the candle tip there. Okay. Before you go on, it's a really good idea to breathe to get your heart rate down. And I heard this tip ages ago, and it's very simple. That's why you remember blow out the candle and blow the roses. No, smell the roses.
Yeah, smell
it's very
the roses.
simple. All you have to do is imagine that your finger is a candle, and slowly blow it out. Because when you blow out slowly, that gets rid of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Okay. And when you slowly smell the roses, so you're breathing into your nose, so that's why you're smelling. Slowly smell the roses, so you're slowly breathing into your nose, because if you suddenly breathe in through your throat, you might hyperventilate and you might faint. Okay. So it's about slow breathing, so blowing out the candle, smelling the roses. That will get your heart rate down. So before you go on, obviously you can't do that mid-flow, but you can certainly do that as you're walking onto your podium or as you're sitting waiting. We did that before we went live today, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Actually,
Good.
I have many responses from the audience. Mm-hmm. Somebody gives 7 because she says that she's confident when she knows the material, but when questions come, she's not that confident, she or he, I don't know. Somebody gives 6 because he says that he often worries too much about the audience.
That's normal.
Than the topic. 7 out of 10, I have to memorize the topic and I am unable to make it free flow.
Yeah, okay.
So it doesn't look natural. I love this response. Okay. Somebody says, I'm not a storyteller. I'm not a storyteller. Yeah, that's, I think, important, right? You need to be first a storyteller before you become an executive.
Yeah, well, okay, so here's the good news, okay? All of those questions are very, very common. I only feel confident when I know the material back to front. I have to know everything, and then I'm fine. Or I'm only confident if I've practiced and practiced and practiced. And sometimes, and people say, can you over practice? Can you over prepare? Well, put it this way, sometimes the best use of your time may not be learning a script, because you're not an actor. You're actually a business person, and you need to be kind of running a business quite a lot of the time. So it might not be the best use of your time learning a script. That's normal. When I get nervous, I speak too fast. That's normal as well. Storytelling, all the time people say, oh, I'm not really creative. I'm not a storyteller. How can I possibly tell a story? I haven't got the right to tell a story. Well, I have got tips coming up. So the tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you. So I've got tricks from Obama. I've got tips from all of the many years of broadcasting when I was at the BBC and beyond. I've worked in television and radio, worked in different live studios. Most of my career, actually, I've spent behind the scenes, and I've been the person behind the glass going, go on, you're good, and holding up the board, we used to call it an idiot board, holding up the idiot board, holding up the subject of the stories, and giving somebody the answers. But what I found, having gone through the painful process of figuring out how to do public speaking and feel comfortable with it myself, I have cultivated all these tips. I've got tips, 1,000 tips. But what I've actually done is I've boiled it down to a simple formula, so you can just easily take some of these themes, and some of these themes will be really, really useful to you. Some of them won't be as useful, but you can pick out the ones that you can really use. For example, the storytelling tip that's going to be coming up in a moment. Okay, so first of all, let's just start with what a lot of people ask me about. There they are. They've been asked to speak at a conference, or they've been asked to do the town hall, and they're standing there and their mind goes blank. Have you ever been in that situation, Demet?
I have.
Okay, so just quickly, you don't have to give me all the details, but quickly, how did you feel that moment when you were standing there? And I've got the little picture there. Help, my mind's gone blank. They're all looking at me. Somebody said that they're worried about the audience. Somebody texted in and said they're worried about the audience. The sea of faces, the eyes with the blank expression, and then your mind goes blank, and you're standing there, and and I have felt that. I felt that. When you felt, do you remember it?
Well, it's not only once. I had it a couple of times.
Me
and
too.
I was just trying to remember what I was talking about because it's really gone blank, and I have no clue what I said just a second ago. And I think what helped me is to pause and think about the topic of the day and naturally continue the conversation. And somehow I would remember what I was talking about and link it to the topic a second ago.
Yeah.
But it's not always that easy. And it's not always happening in in front of big audiences. Sometimes it happens in a one-to-one conversation that you need to go and speak to a client to sell a service, to talk about your products, your services, and everything. That may also happen in a one-to-one conversation, which is sometimes worse than being on stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite often, if you have had that experience, and I have had that experience several times, it puts you off. Yeah. So many of my clients have said, I don't want to do public speaking anymore. I don't. If my mind goes blank, my career's ruined. That's it for me. But the reason why I've been brought in quite often is because they have to do it now. So they've put off public speaking for maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years. In one case, 13 years. And so we had to start from the beginning. Okay, you're going to be okay. We are going to have safety nets. It's okay. All I can say is this. So the reason why I wrote the book, Goodbye Glossophobia. Glossophobia is the fear of public speaking. And you can Google it, and it's on Amazon, but it's also on my website, Goodbye Glossophobia. The reason I wrote the book, and I'm so passionate about this, is because I know that you can get over glossophobia, the fear of public speaking. I know every single trick in the book now because I've done research. I've spoken to neuroscientists. I've observed leaders. I've worked with leaders. I've worked with CEOs, CFOs, COOs. I've worked with people that haven't spoken for years because they've had a horrible experience. I have had a mind blank, out of body experience several times, and I write about it in the book. One of them it was one of my first speaking engagements when I left the BBC and I set up my own business, and it was for a women's network. And I remember they said, "Oh yes, can you come and speak to our group of women?" I remember saying, "Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean speak to our group? How big's the group?" And I think the woman said, "Oh, there's only about 40." I'm like, 40 people, and then suddenly I just couldn't believe I was going to stand in front of 40 people, and sure enough, what I dreaded, which is my mind going blank, happened. But luckily, I had put a script here, a script there, and a script over there somewhere, and I had a glass of water positioned at the side. And I quickly, and I asked the audience, I think I just asked the audience a question like, "What do you think about that?" Walked over to my water and just looked at the notes, and my brain was fuzzy, and all I could do was pick out one thing on the page. It was in no particular order. So I just went from that one thing on the page. And
so what you're saying is it helps to have some notes in front of you?
Okay, so my rule of thumb is always have safety nets. If you're worried that you might go blank, have something nearby in your pocket on a table. There's always a safety net. Have a safety net because it will help your nerves. If you don't have any script, because most audiences don't like a script. People don't really like you using a script. And also, scripts can be very difficult to handle physically if you're holding a script. If you're using an auto cue, it's a different skill altogether. That's more of a Barack Obama skill of how to read an auto cue. But always have something that will trigger your memory if it will make you feel more confident. I think generally there are loads and loads of safety nets, and I can answer questions about that later. But would you like me to go? Shall I start with my formula?
Yes, please.
Shall I give you? This is my triple A formula.
Okay.
This formula is inspired by Americans because it's got a bit of awesomeness in it. It's also inspired by all of the many people that I've worked with and my years of broadcasting, when I realised there are just a few things that if you think about these 3 things, and I've boiled it down to 3 A's, if you think about these 3 A's, you can, if you apply it to yourself, you will be better at speaking and it will make you much more confident. Okay, so the 3 A's are, and we're going to unwrap each one. So audience, authentic, and awesome. Okay, so we'll start with the audience. Do you remember when we did the masterclass and we talked about the audience? And I talked about when Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, once asked me, do you have a tip for me? And I said, well, it's very simple. And as a broadcaster, you do this every day. It's very, very simple. And if there is a silver bullet of speaking like a leader, it's this. All you've got to do is love your audience a little bit more than yourself. But I'm not sure whether Boris Johnson listened to me. I'm not sure if he took my advice. And I'm not sure if everyone takes my advice. But what that means is you have to put the audience first. What do they need? Why do they care? And the truth is, Demet, the truth is this. Most of the time, and in answer to the question that came up, I think about my audience too much, or I'm worried about the audience. Most of the time, the audience doesn't really care about you.
They care about themselves.
Most of the time, the audience cares about themselves. So this is very, very simple. It's not rocket science. But if you actually start your prep by thinking, who are they? Why do they care? And the first answer to that is, guess what? They don't care that much. It makes it kind of easier to prep. So
somebody from the audience, they say, I always try to think of my audience as my consumer and market to them. That's right. The audience is your client. Yes. The audience is your end user, and you try to sell your idea or sell your thoughts to them.
Absolutely. That's a really good starting point.
So here we are again talking about customer experience.
Yes, we are. We're managing to go. That's your area of expertise. So the rule of thumb is this. Step into their shoes, and I've got a little picture of shoes there. And then all you have to do is sit for a moment, visualize you in the audience. Now, sometimes it might be a smallish audience. It could be an exco meeting. It could be 8 people around a boardroom table. Picture yourself in the shoes of the key decision maker in that audience. And just for a moment, shut your eyes or have some thinking space for a moment and just think, what's in it for me? Why do I care? And this is a really obvious thing to do, but this is what people fail to do quite often when they have to speak to a group. They think about the script first. They think about what the message is first. And actually park that. Just sit for a minute and think, if I'm sitting in the audience, what do I really care about? And actually the truth is, the brutal truth is, that the audience is pretty much, there's a famous quote actually from this professor of the internet called Jakob Nielsen, and he did a famous quote about people that use the internet. And he came to the conclusion that they were selfish, lazy, and ruthless. And it's really the same with an audience.
And what
selfish,
happens,
lazy, ruthless.
What happens though if you don't have enough insights about the audience, that you can't really empathy?
Well, here's the thing. Most audiences are pretty much, you can guess about most audiences. So, for example, when I got a group of lawyers recently, it was a leadership conference, and I asked the lawyers on post-it notes to just write down, what do you think your client is thinking when you're coming on to speak? And I didn't say be rude, or be horrible about lawyers. I didn't say something negative. And they filled out these post-it notes, and this is completely unprompted. Can you see what they wrote on the post-it notes?
When is lunch?
Yeah, go on. When is lunch?
Not another lawyer.
Yeah.
This is going to be dull.
Yes.
Yeah? Be quick, I'm busy.
Most of the time. And please do send us messages. most of the time the audience don't want you to bore them. They want you to give them something interesting, something they can think about, tell you something they haven't heard before. They don't want you to be a long time. They want you to be quick. And they normally want something like free lunch. Something free, something good.
Is there a time span that the audience can focus their attention? Is it 1 minute? Is it 10 minutes? What if you're in front of them and you need to make a speech for 30 minutes? How do you keep their attention?
Okay, so here's a rule of thumb. I've got what I've put here, the truth about audiences. In today's digital world, people are clicking and reading, and they've got Insta and social media and this program and Netflix and Amazon and Apple TV, and there's so many things coming at you now in this day and age, right? Your attention is divided in so many different ways. So the truth of the matter is, in the YouTube generation, I mean, even with my daughter who's 13 and my son who's 9, they will give a video on YouTube, I think probably 2 seconds before they click away. 2 seconds. And that's the reality. And just because they're kids, it doesn't mean they're no different from us. We give people very little time to make a decision about, shall I bother listening to you? So the rule of thumb, if you've got a 30-minute presentation or a 1-hour presentation, if you don't get people in the first kind of 0 to 10 seconds, they're going to switch off.
That's very hard, Dan. It's very hard. You're on the stage and you've got 10 seconds to get their attention.
Yeah. So that can come in many ways. It can come by your attitude, the way you look, the way you sound, the way that you come across. I mean, all of those things are really important. But does the audience know that you're on their side? Are you going to give the audience something? So a really good trick is to just come up, just to have a think about what is your killer top line, or what's your intro, or how are you being introduced? Because if you're introduced in the right way, where there's, where the audience have got something to take away from your talk, they're going to want to listen to you. So I've got a general rule of thumb: always have a killer top line, or have something really good. So top fill your presentation. That's the tip there. In fact, when I speak to lawyers and engineers and people that are kind of in the kind of data space, and I work with a lot of financial services and data analytics people, professionals, quite often the tip for them is get your punchline and stick it at the top. And sometimes people say, oh, but I can't give away my punchline. No, but I'm building up. It's like I've got this proper flow of conversation, and I've got to contextualize first. I'm telling a story, and then there's a punchline. But then I say the problem is that by the time you reached your punchline, they switched off. So a good idea, a rule of thumb: get your punchline, stick it at the top. So, for example,
can you give for example?
Yeah, for example.
Because people are asking questions. What is the top line?
What are they saying? Okay. Oh, what's a top line?
Yeah. Can you give an example of a killer top line?
A killer top line. Okay. Here's an example. In fact, if you can think of an example of a killer top line, keep it clean. We'll read them out. I'll give you an example. Okay. So, for example, it could be a killer statistic. So, in your organization, maybe your top line is 99% of people do this. So it could be a statistic. Or this actually is a real story. One of my clients had to go to Houston to talk about, it was a $2 billion problem. And when he was talking about going to this meeting in Houston, and it was quite a few people going to be there, maybe 50 people, normally he would tell a story, and this is the backstory, and this is why, and it's all about risk, and it's all about compliance. And then I said, what is the problem? What is the story here? And it was a $2 billion problem. So he did decide for that particular instant, his top line was going to be, Houston, we have a problem.
We have a problem.
And obviously that's a pastiche of the moon landing, but here's the thing. It's always good to think, what will make the audience go, oh, really? What will give the audience that? When I worked at the BBC, we used to call it prick up your ears moment. What will give the audience that, really? Tell me more. So a question, a story, or a statement. That's
nice. And
yeah.
what you're suggesting is to do this at the start of the conversation, don't wait till the end of your story.
Yeah, I
give
think
the top
so.
line at the start. Okay.
Yeah, or give them something. You need a hook, and there's not a one size fits all. Yeah,
you need to engage them in
exactly.
a way.
And some people say, should I start with a joke? Well, if the joke is going to offend somebody, or it might make you look a bit clownish,
don't do it.
Then no. But actually, if you've got a sense of humour and you can make it humorous and you can break the ice, why not? But it's got to be audience appropriate.
Yeah, somebody says here, like Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
She says, when they go low, we go high.
Exactly. That's one of her killer top lines. So, for example, Michelle Obama could come on and say something like, have you ever felt 2 inches tall? Because I have. Do you want to know the story behind it?
Yeah, then people will engage
and
listen to it.
Or, when they go low, I mean, that's actually a mid killer line, isn't it?
It's not the top one.
But why not? Why don't we just use that as a top line? Of course you could use that as a top line. That's brilliant.
I have a question again.
Yes.
How would you recommend, I have a question from the audience. How would you recommend pulling in the audience when you're talking about a rather dull topic? For example, I'm working on rolling out a new policy at our company, and it's quite boring. By nature, people just don't care.
Absolutely brilliant question. The reason why that's such a brilliant question is because that's exactly how I help people to make an impact and influence their audience. So here's the thing. On my watch, there's no such thing as a boring subject. Okay? It can't be boring because why are you doing it? Is it saving money? Is there a risk? So quite often it's because you've got to identify what the benefit to the audience is. Now, when I say that, it's about getting into your audience's shoes and thinking, why are they there? And if they're sitting there thinking, why do I need to listen to this boring rubbish? If that's what your audience are thinking, then you've really got to work really hard in your presentation to answer that question. So if I were you, I would start that kind of presentation. First of all, make sure that you call it something that is not boring. So not compliance training for in-house counsel. You want to say, how to keep out of jail or something, or just something that's, a bit human, right? Layman's terms. And if I were you, I would start with something like, so you've come to this presentation, you're thinking, why am I here? How does it possibly benefit you? Well, here's the thing. If you get some of this stuff wrong, we could shut the entire organization down.
Yeah, then people again will listen.
Yeah, I mean, there is a reason. There is a reason for doing a compliance or a risk. And I helped somebody once with their speech about tax. It was about tax, right? It was actually about VAT, which is value-added tax in the UK. And she said, this is the most boring subject in the world. How am I ever going to do this speech? And I remember helping her. I said, the thing is that tax, it's people get passionate about tax. They do.
Oh, God.
Come on, tax can ruin our lives. And I actually remember the beginning of the speech. The beginning of her speech, this was her killer top line about tax. This is true. The beginning of her speech went, VAT. Just those 3 little letters can ruin your life. And that was the beginning of it. Guess what? After that, she got 3 job offers. She wasn't going there to get a job, but it was the first time she'd spoken in front of a large audience. There were very senior people there. They were really impressed with her. She got 3 job offers.
And what about the non-verbals, Esther? Do they matter as much as the content of the speech?
Absolutely. The non-verbals is actually coming up in my third A, which is the awesome A.
I'll hold
so I've got loads of them, and I just want to make sure we're going to fit it in. So, but we talked earlier, somebody said they felt like they couldn't tell stories. So now, in chapter 13 of the book, What's the Story, Morning Glory, it's all about telling stories. Now, telling stories isn't that difficult. And I'm going to set you a little bit of homework here. All you've got to do is remember a moment in your life, or it could be a moment in a project. It could just remember a conversation. It could be a water cooler moment. It could be a quote from somebody. But here's a really, really good tip. So if your subject is about compliance, for example, and it's a really boring subject, or it's about tax, let's just say if it's about compliance, it's a boring. You think it's boring. I don't think it is boring, but you think it's boring. Okay? Just think about an incident, an example, a story, a case study that would illustrate your point, the point that you're making in that particular presentation. So, for example, I put here on my slide, I remember one time when, or I remember when. I remember one time. Just think of one example that illustrates your point, and I bet you can come up with a story. So just remember that. I remember one time, ... Now, so your homework is to go away and think about filling in those dots. So think about your subject, think about your next meeting, think about your next presentation, and just think of an incident that illustrates it, and start that sentence.
Actually, when you do like that, it gives an evidence that you know the topic, right?
Yeah.
Because it relates to you. It's also very authentic because you say, I remember one time that this is how I went through this. So it's authentic. You're talking about yourself, and probably you're also putting an emotion when you say, I remember one time.
Yeah.
When you say like that, right?
So, for example, if I just said to you, you know, can you remember one time when somebody messed up their compliance? You probably could remember one time. I'm not a compliance person, but I can certainly remember when somebody I know has messed up a compliance issue. You know, everybody's got a story about. You can easily fill in those dots, and you don't have to be a storyteller to be able to tell a story. Which brings me on to the middle A, which again I think I'm going to have to set some homework so we can get through all of my excellent tips and my formula. The middle A, and this is what I've noticed from great leaders and great speakers, is that the middle A is authentic. So what did Oscar Wilde say? Be yourself, because everybody else is already taken. and although it's cliche, be yourself, and your parents say be yourself, or your loved ones, oh, you'll be fine, be yourself, they tell you, and you think, oh, it's all right when I'm just sitting here at this kitchen table, but what about when I'm on air, or what about when I'm in front of an audience at a conference? How can I'm wired up, I'm at a podium, 300 people are looking at me. How can I be myself? Well, seriously, there's an art to this, and you've got to believe me here. The more that you can be yourself, the more successful you're going to be as a speaker and a leader, and the more confident you're going to feel in the long run. But at first, it does feel a bit scary going out of your comfort zone. So I'm going to set you a little bit of homework, and if you want to give us some of these answers now, please do, because it's funny. So when I went to see Michelle Obama at the O2, and Michelle Obama is a great example of somebody who really had to think about being herself and her personal brand, and what people thought of her, and the way that she was coming across in the media. She's an example of the media really got her wrong, according to her. She said she didn't recognize this person that the media was portraying, and she had to learn she had to decide who is the brand Michelle Obama going to be? And so what I learned from Michelle Obama is that you really can take control of your personal brand. You can decide what brand you is. And although, some people just say, look, people can take me or leave me. Fine. But why not take control? Why not decide what are your best bits? What's the best side of you? What is being yourself? What do you want people to say about you? And you can be really powerful. But you have to embrace who you are, what kind of person you are. Embrace all of your strengths and weaknesses, and maximize what you've got. So my question to you is, what are your best assets? What are the best things about you? What's the most memorable thing about you? What's the odd thing about you? That's a really good question to ask yourself. So if you can send us a few of your messages now, I would really love to know. Otherwise, I would definitely set that as your homework. Ask your friends and family and loved ones, what is the best thing about you in a professional context and a personal context. Because this is about you as a person. Because business is personal, right? You are a whole person. And you do better business, guess what? When you're being a human being, please be a normal human being. Mm-hmm. So that's the trick, is to find out what you're really good at. And then, has anyone?
Well, the thing is, people are chatting with each other. They're asking questions. They're replying to each other.
Right, okay, great.
There's a very live conversation going on here. So, I want to focus on something. It's also in your book that you specifically talk about women. And you just said it's important to be powerful. It's important to talk about or to be aware about your assets. But do you also see that women usually feel less powerful than men? And does this impact their business performance and the way they speak in public?
Absolutely. And what I found, and I'm going to go to the third A now, because we're talking about the non-verbals. Okay. And in terms of non-verbal, as in the way that you look, the way that you sound, the way you feel, what are you portraying physically? So we're going to move on to the third A, which is awesome. How to be a little bit awesome, which is all of the non-verbals. And it does relate, this particularly relates to women as well, because this is about physically owning your space. Now, what I quite often find when it comes to women in leadership positions is that quite often, and one of the reasons I wrote the book, and it's not a gender-specific issue, public speaking. In fact, Prince Harry of the UK is glossophobic. There are many men fear public speaking. However, what I have found, having worked with many, many senior women and spoken at women's conferences, like when we met with women only, women really very, very often don't like the sensation of the spotlight on them and a sea of faces, or if they're outnumbered, maybe sitting at that table, and the senior men might be looking at them, expecting them to be brilliant, and you're sitting there. And a lot of women really don't like that sensation, so choose not to be in the spotlight, choose not to put themselves in the firing line, because sometimes you feel, when you're public speaking, you feel like you're in the firing line.
Yeah, the whole world is watching you.
Yeah, you feel judged. Yeah. You feel that people are looking you up and down. They are. But I've got some great tips. Okay, great. So the great tip, these are the tips. These are the awesome tips, and they're physical tips. I mean, there are many, many tips, and there are, there's a whole theme of imposter syndrome where you feel as if you're not good enough, and I still feel like that sometimes. Many people feel like that. It's really, really important to listen to other women and speak to people in leadership positions and just ask them how they feel. And what you'll find is that most people have got some sort of insecurity. All of the Hollywood stars I've ever interviewed and all of the leaders I've interviewed, every single person has got an element of self-doubt, of insecurity, of that feeling of, I don't think I'm that good. I'm not really good enough. Somebody else is better than me. And I still have to remind myself on a daily basis, I might not be perfect, but I do know what I'm doing now. I have to remind myself, I have been doing this for 28 years. I still think I'm not good enough, personally. But here's the thing. When it comes to the physical, owning your space, the physical tips, it's all about the way that you come across, your presence. It's about your physical power and also your vocal power. So I have got another little formula to share. Great. So this is great, isn't it? Because we've got it all wrapped up in a nutshell. So the third A, how to be a little bit awesome. Now, I realised when I was a live producer at the BBC that people were coming into the studio and I had very, very little time to make them go from, I'm going to go live on air, to, I'm live on air. And this is politicians, Hollywood stars, famous people that you would think would be 100% confident. Honestly, they would be like, oh, we're going live. Oh. And I'd have to get them from kind of to ta-da. Now,
so this is standing up, right?
Yeah, so
and
this is now.
Can you show that
I can
when we're standing up and when we're all wired up?
Okay, now we're talking about the power pose, but I'm going to talk you through rules of thumb for looking, sounding, and feeling confident. So I came up with this thing, pose, P-O-S-E, as in the power pose. I came up with pose way before there was a TED Talk about it. Now there's a TED Talk about the power pose from Amy Cuddy from Harvard Business School, because she came up with the science behind the powerful posture. Now her theory and her science, her experiments are based around if you stand in a powerful way. So if we put our hands on our hips, we'll do it sitting down. If you want to stand up, feel free. If you stand powerfully, you will feel more confident. And according to Amy Cuddy, it takes 2 minutes to build up testosterone or courage or whatever makes you feel brave. That's the science behind it. However, if you stood like this in your meeting, you might look a bit
weird.
So my pose is actually what you do when you are performing. It's what you need to do when you actually are performing. So P does in fact stand for posture. But the rule of thumb is this. Sit up straight. If you're sitting, sit up straight. Rule of thumb, if you're standing or sitting, you want your feet to be planted. So you want to have equal weight on your feet. So you don't want to be swaying, or you don't want to be moving from side to side. You don't want to be on one hip. You want to be nice and planted. And that will give you a strong and powerful base. Because when you perform, when you want to feel powerful and you want to own your space, you want to feel the gravity, because gravitas comes from gravity, which is weight. So rule of thumb, powerful base. So that's your feet. As you work up your body, you don't want any kind of weird angles, or you don't want to be making yourself small. You want to be making yourself big, shoulders back, head going towards the ceiling. For women, quite often, you feel uncomfortable feeling big, because quite often women would much prefer to be small or cover up or, cross their body or cross their legs, cross their arms. And actually you want to be have a powerful posture, because having a powerful posture is really good for your voice. So at this point, people quite often ask me,
what do I do with my hands?
What do you do?
All over the space sometimes.
What do you do with your hands? What do you do with your hands? Now, if you're sitting down like this, it's quite straightforward. You can probably just put your hands on the desk like this. When you're standing, and particularly if you haven't got a podium, there is a rule of thumb. And the rule of thumb is this. It's not to do... Hang on, let me just go to this one. It's not to do what Angela Merkel does. There's many theories about body language and what this means and what this means. This is something, I think somebody told her that you look more like a leader if you take up more space, if you're doing this hand movement. Donald Trump does this kind of thing. I mean, all politicians do really weird things with their hands. I can give you the general rule of thumb. The general rule of thumb is above waist height. And in the book of TED Talks, actually, this is the business area. So this is imagine you've got a TV screen here. You want your hands to be above waist height, but kind of loosely resting one on the other. Yeah, you don't really want to do too much of that, because that looks like you're holding onto something. You want to just loosely hold them. It's weird if you're sitting down, but if you're standing up, it does look okay. It looks quite normal. And now when you watch television, you'll notice the TV presenters with their hands above their waist. Okay. Yeah? So do you remember that?
I will remember it for the next webcast.
Okay. So
I'm learning everything here.
Yeah, so the main thing, but the main theme there is big, powerful posture. Powerful, so high status, tall, head going up. You don't want to be crunched and small, because as soon as you crunch your body up or make yourself small or make yourself look like you're in a weak pose, it lowers your status, and you really want to have a high status when you're a leader. The other thing about posture is it gives you more room, so you have a much better voice. But
I think as a woman here, we have an advantage over men. because I've also watched one of your videos that we have the advantage to play with the dressing, with the colors, with the makeup, with the way we use our mimics. But for men, it's quite like in a box, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think you can always have a twist.
Okay.
You see, I think you can always have a lapel with a colour. Oh, I touched my microphone. But you can always have a colour or an interesting tie or a cool jacket, a
But
good
you don't also want to take the full attention to a color on you, right?
No, I mean dress sense and that kind of in the sense of how you're going to portray yourself with your fashion. That's a whole other theme.
That's another webcast.
Yes, that's a whole other webcast. I could get you designers and stylists. My rule of thumb is dress to your personality. You know, and if you don't want, and people say, "Oh, I couldn't be myself. It's unprofessional." I say, well, you don't have to dress like a clown. You don't have to make jokes. You know, but you can dress to your personality. If you are a colourful character, wear a bit of colour.
That again comes back to the 3 A's: authenticity. Be yourself.
Be yourself, always. Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to feel comfortable in what you're wearing. And I think it is really important to wear something that signals something about you. So, which brings me on to O of pose, which stands for oomph, which means energy. Or, if you are in Shanghai, you might say, yo, that's chayo. I have learned the word oomph in many languages because oomph is a bit of a weird word. It's kind of a made up word. It's kind of chutzpah, or it's auf geht's in German, or allez in French. But in Shanghai it would be chayo, chayo, chayo. It just means energy. So if you want to speak like a leader, you need energy behind your words. And that is all in a little bit of a warm up. So there was a picture earlier of the All Blacks doing the haka, the rugby team. Just putting a bit of behind your words really, really helps you because you want to have a good, powerful voice. So after 3, could you give me a Demet? Ready? In 3, 2, 1. You should have seen us warming up earlier. It wasn't a pretty sight. Which brings me on to the S of pose. So we've got the posture, we've got the oomph, and now the speech. So if you've warmed up well and you've given yourself a bit of energy, what you can do is warm up your local apparatus for speech, which is your mouth. And actually, your tongue is a muscle. So if you warm up your tongue a little bit, you will speak better. So why not be the best version of you, and why not liven up your tongue, which is a muscle? So you could do a little. So sometimes I do a little tongue twister, and I've got it in 3 languages. I've got 3 different tongue twisters. So we'll try the English one first. So can you repeat? If you're in the privacy of your own space, you could try this. She sells seashells on the seashore. Demet?
She sells seashells on the shore.
On the seashore, that's brilliant. Okay, now I'm not so good at this next one because I'm not absolutely 100% how you pronounce. I'm
not the right person
French,
to read
but
this.
I do remember asking one of my clients, and they worked in a French bank, and I said, "What's the French tongue twister?" And they went, "C'est sûr qu'on ne sait pas ceci sont." And it was about sour cherries, I think. So, am I saying it wrong? Oh, I can't say it at all. Anyway, if you understand French.
Oh, you speak like you speak Chinese. You sound like you speak Chinese, Esther, to me. It doesn't sound like French.
and then one of my German clients said they had a German tongue twister that they quite often use. And that can you speak German?
I can't.
You can't? I thought you could speak German.
I speak Turkish.
Oh, right. Should we try and do it together then? Ready? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Schnecken, Schrecken, Wein Sie, Schnecken, Schleckel, Weiß. Anyway, it's about, as you can see, my tongue can't twist round this tongue twister. I think it's about a snail and a snail shell. The point is, if you can get your mouth around a difficult tongue twister, it's really good for your voice. It's really good for your tongue. and it's much better to liven up your mouth before you
And it's
speak.
very logical because you
Yeah.
warm up before you do any sports. So this is warming up your
Yeah.
muscles.
Speaking is a sport.
It's a sport.
So why not be an athlete at it? And this is a great tip from Barack Obama. Pause for way longer than you think you can.
Pause.
Earlier on when you said pause, you did pause. I was very impressed. That's across the board, slow and loud with a bit of oomph. You will sound and look better immediately. These tips are immediate, okay? And then finally, the E of pose is eyes and teeth. Smile! Now I've got...
That always helps.
Yes, and even before we went on air, I said, if in doubt, eyes and teeth. Now, I can go on and on about smiling because, and people fight me and they say, I want to be credible. I want to be professional. I don't want to come across as, dumbing things down. I don't want to come across as a clown. Why would I smile? Here's the thing. Smiling mixed with the power it's like mixing warmth with power. The power pose, the gravitas, the gravity that you're feeling, the powerful shoulders, and the smile, the warm smile, makes you look like you can handle it. It makes you look that you're relaxed, that you're open, you're approachable, you're engaging. There's not one downside to smiling. It's really good for your voice as well, which is why opera singers sing like this. So, and there's actually science behind it, which I'm not going to go into now, but in a nutshell, when your zygomatic major nerve goes up, your brain goes, I'm happy. So there you are. That's my little acronym POSE, POSE, the power of the pose. So now I would like to know, all the people that sent if you sent your marks out of 10, your marks out of 10 earlier, do you think that your marks out of 10 could be more? That's a rhetorical question. You can send them in now if you like. I would like to know if you put all those tips into practice right now, would you be more 9 out of 10? No, what mark would you give yourself out of 10?
Yes, everybody says yes.
Oh,
yes,
thank
yes.
you.
So this is great.
Okay, have you gone up 2 sizes?
The nice thing is, at the start of this webcast, you said this is not that difficult.
Yes.
And we as human beings think that speaking in public is not an easy thing. But these are actually very simple and easy to learn tips.
Yes.
Breathing, pause, the 3 A's. So I think there's a lot to learn.
Absolutely.
With small improvements, you can be a great presenter.
Absolutely. And if there are any other questions that we haven't answered, we've got time. We've got 1 minute, haven't we, to answer one of the questions that came up.
I can take a few questions, or actually there are many tips in this book. And we're also going to have a podcast about the book. So you can also follow Esther on her website. She's also got a YouTube channel.
Yeah, or you can email me.
You can email her and get more tips because we won't have enough time to answer and cover all your questions. But it's great to have you here, Esther. And I've learned a lot myself. After the first master class, and I'm sure that it's not only being an executive, it's not only being about being a leader, but we are speaking in public every day, and the tips that you give are very useful on a daily basis, and it even helps more in the boardroom. I'm sure about that.
Absolutely. I think there's just, if you could take away a couple of key messages today. First of all, do speak more often. Just get out there and get your voice heard. Use my tips. Smile and pause. You'll be better at speaking. But just remember, the audience is quite simple. The audience doesn't need that much, but just don't bore them.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you again, Esther. Please fill out the evaluation form. Some people are asking about your email address. So Esther Stanhope, she's got her website. You can also see her on LinkedIn, on her website, and here is her email address. please take just 2 minutes, complete the brief evaluation form so that we are better in the next webcast. Till next time, have a good day.